This video contains elements that are not suitable for children under the age of 14. Viewer discretion is advised.
Guys, where do you think Zach has gone?
Beats me. He should be here by now to talk about Series 22.
Come to think of it, I think Matt's gone missing as well. Where is he anyway?
Here I am, guys. Sorry I'm late. I just had to deal with something first.
Well, at least you're here now. Where has Matt gotten to?
Oh, right. I killed him and then put his organs up for sale on the black market.
Pizza, Zach, what is
That's
wrong with
messed
you?
up, man.
Got you there, didn't I? Don't worry, you're free. Matt's fine. Earlier I had to detain him.
What do you mean by detain?
Well...
Oh no, please tell me that you didn't. Not again, at least.
Dude, not funny, Zach. And black comedy just makes it worse.
Let me guess. You tied him up and locked him in the closet just so he wouldn't break out into a rage when you get to Forever and Ever, all while usually dropping the F-bomb whenever he talks about it. Is that right?
More or less?
You do realize that Matt will eventually force his way out of that closet and charge towards you like a rabid dog, right?
I'm aware of that, but even if that was the case, I made sure the door was reinforced so I don't have to deal with him interrupting me while I'm trying to discuss the show. Seriously, I'm sick of Matt doing so.
I think we all did at some point, Zach. And you never got angry with us for it.
Well, it was mostly Matt, and you usually had a reason for being here, which I accepted, but you get my point.
Do you think we should try and set him free?
Nah, let's just leave him there. I just want to teach him a lesson for sticking his ass where it doesn't belong.
Well, if you say so.
Nearly 5 years and they still hadn't sorted out their rivalry.
I'm gonna help Brandon with his Sonic series now. But I may have something to say about Banjo and the Bushfire a bit later if you'd call me up for that.
Right, now then. Sorry about the delay, folks. Just had to get a certain Canadian ape off my back. But now, I can finally discuss Series 22 of Thomas and Friends. Again. But before I do, don't sell anyone's body parts on the internet because it's illegal and you'll end up in trouble for it. So, 2018, huh? Quite a year, wasn't it? Maybe not as depressing as 2016, but it really had its downer moments, and it dribbled its way into the Thomas fandom, what with the latest set of changes to the show. The latest era of the show was piloted by the 80-minute special Big World Big Adventures, and like the two specials prior, it was divisive among the fandom. However, it was easily the most divisive of the specials released up to this point, with some ranking it even worse than Day of the Diesels, which I really don't get. Even if you didn't like Big World Big Adventures, there are far worse movies out there. We did a whole review on that back in 2019, so you can check that out as well as our thoughts on Series 22 the same year in the links below. Those two reviews were probably some of our best work. Anyway, the rebrand was masterminded by Ian McHugh and Michaela Winter based upon market research conducted by Mattel with audiences around the globe, wondering how to keep Thomas and Friends relevant in a competitive market, and hoping to reverse declining toy sales. One suggestion they took on board was, trains can go places, but Thomas never goes anywhere. If you're expecting us to make some kind of joke about that, sorry, but we never stooped to that level. And that brings us on to Series 22. So why do I start with the changes made? The series reverted to having 26 episodes, but there is now an even split between SOTOR stories and non-SOTOR stories, 4 episodes each in India and Australia, and 5 in China. I'll get to my thoughts on those in a bit. While they still utilize the 11-minute format including the intro, end credits, and song, the main episodes were reduced once more to 7 minutes. The remainder of the episode consists of a pre-episode introduction before it and a life lesson segment after it. Frankly, they serve no purpose to the episodes. All that introduction segment does is hype up the episode I'm about to watch, even when it doesn't need that boost. The life lesson segment not only hammers in the episode's message to the target audience, but also ends up reminding you of a previous episode from Series 17 to 21. You could cut those segments all together and the result would be better off for it. For the first time, not every episode ended with the Big World Big Adventures engine roll call. The international episodes ended with Journey Never Ends, and for Series 23, Let's Dream name was added at the end of some episodes, as was the Steam Team for Series 24, one of the least creative song titles I've ever seen. This was a change that I thought was a good one, since it adds more variety rather than just constantly listening to the same song over and over again. Oh, and as a slight amendment to my Series 19 review, I never applied anything about the revised engine roll call being better than the classic theme song. I was simply saying the revised roll call for Series 19 to 21 was better than the version from Series 8 to 18. Okay? Okay. Good. Okay. On top of those changes, there is a new theme song to celebrate the rebranding of the show, creatively titled Big World Big Adventures, and just as creatively based upon Series 21's Set Friendship in Motion. It doesn't really feel like a theme song to Thomas and Friends at all. When a theme song to a TV show or film series becomes iconic, you end up thinking of the show or film series it was made for. Shows like The Simpsons and SpongeBob and movie franchises like Harry Potter have been going on for over 20 years or more, and if they were to have their theme songs replaced, then they would lose a part of their own identity. In Thomas's case, he lost his most iconic theme in 2004, but even the engine roll call feels more like a part of his identity than the Big World Big Adventures theme song does. For every episode, a fantasy sequence was included, and they're pretty much a double-edged sword. At best, they were fun and entertaining. At worst, they were outright forced and wasted the viewer's time. Probably one of the best uses of the fantasy sequence was in An Engine of Many Colors, in which they serve as nightmare sequences for James following his crash in the fastest red engine on Sodor, thinking that he might be repainted blue, green, or silver, and then crashes once more when he gets carried away with his new paint job. What I like about that episode is that it uses the fantasy sequences to their advantage rather than being tacked on for the sake of filling up 7 minutes. And it was a pretty strong start for new writer Michael White, who would continue to write 7 more episodes over the next 3 series. Believe it or not, I didn't know Michael was a part of the fandom until doing a bit of light research. On YouTube, he's better known as White House Films. Check out his YouTube account in the description below. Speaking of An Engine of Many Colors, if you were to combine it with the fastest red engine on Sodor and a shed for Edward, you would get a mini special out of him which has been given the fan nickname Red Engines and Shed Trouble. I've done a fan edit myself, but unfortunately, I can't post it on YouTube because An Engine of Many Colors has been blocked worldwide by Mattel. Thanks a lot. But I can provide an alternative link in the description below. The penultimate change to the format was Thomas himself serving as the narrator. Like most of the changes made, it came with its own set of pros and cons. On the positive side, since Thomas is on his worldwide adventures, it makes sense for him to tell it to the audience. It's his story, so naturally we want to hear it from his point of view. But on the negative side, and this mostly concerns the Sodor stories, Thomas being the narrator means that he's more shoehorned than he already was. Why can't we hear stories being told from another engine's point of view? If you want to have the Sodor stories told from the perspective of someone, why not have it be Sir Topham Hatt, and the segments before and after the episodes could have him establish the main story and recap the lesson, respectively. It would have felt reminiscent of Danny Doherty introducing the Fyodor Tugboat stories, and those segments would have actually had a purpose rather than just being there to fill up the runtime. Plus, Keith Wickham had voiced Sir Topham Hatt in both English dubs since The Adventure Begins. He'd done so from the get-go in the British dub, and that would have saved a bit of time and money in the recording studio. Sounds like a lost opportunity there if you ask me. And of course, there's the revised Steam Team, but I'll come to that in a bit. For now, I'll delve into the international half of Series 22. Making their first appearances in the show proper are Yongbao from China, Ashima and Rajiv from India, and Shane from Australia. I'll try to make my reviews on each of them as brief as I can to avoid the risk of this review going on for too long. Yongbao is my favorite of the 4 of them, and I really like seeing him interact with Thomas, especially in Series 23 and 24. It really feels like there's a bond between them, something I never felt with Hiro. There, I said it. Shane is a lot of fun too with his hammy, laid-back personality, and it helped that his voice actor, Shane Jacobson, is a comedian. Rajiv is India's equivalent to James, and he's a lot of fun to watch whenever he's on screen. Between him and Yongbao, I'm glad they didn't have speaking roles in The Great Race, because if they had, they probably would have had voices that would come off as offensive, and The Simpsons got into hot water in 2017 over its character Apu Nahasapima Petalam being considered a quote-unquote negative stereotype. And Big World Big Adventures was in development around that time as well.
Coincidence? I think not!
Finally, there's Ashima, and I'm gonna say it, I never cared for her at all. Her role in The Great Race was absolutely redundant, just to teach Thomas a lesson about being himself that he should know by now. We already got that with Gator and Percy in Tale of the Brave, so why bother retreading what already worked? And that's not even getting into how many fans ship them together. Look, I respect your opinion if you like shipping them together, but I'm sorry, Ashima and Thomas would never work out as a couple in my eyes, even if you were to somehow work around the fact that it's a long-distance relationship. You know what that reminds me of? Flash Sentry and Sunset Shimmer in Legend of Everfree, in which the female is the worst possible candidate for a love interest to a male, and there's a ton of evidence proving why it would never work. I'd rather see Thomas end up with Rosie, and I'll come to that episode soon enough. Even though Ashima felt more like a character in series 23 and 24 rather than Miss Exposition, she's never been one of my top favorites. As for the other international newbies, if Mattel wanted to enforce some girl power into the series, then they could have done more of who was introduced in series 22. I mean, Hongmei, Tabika, Ayla, Noor Jahan didn't have a whole lot in terms of personality, and even then, they're not very interesting. It was nice that the Indian Railway had a female controller with Charubala, but even with that, it makes you wonder why Sodor doesn't bother bringing in female railway workers with a few exceptions, like Nia's driver. The only other international character to leave some form of an impact was Shankar the Indian Diesel. His no-nonsense personality contrasts with Rajiv's arrogance and vanity really well, and Shankar really shines whenever he turns up, even getting his own episode in Series 24. In general, the international episodes are a mixed bag to me. Series 22 did have its highlights like Tiger Trouble, Thomas and the Dragon, and Kangaroo Christmas, but then it also had more middling episodes like Number 1 Engine and Trusty Trunky, and really boring episodes like Thomas in the Wild and Thomas in the Monkey Palace. But for me, the worst international episode has always been Thomas Goes to Bollywood, as it practically represents the worst habits of the international stories for Series 22, putting more emphasis on culture rather than telling a story, Thomas and other characters barely displaying any personality, and a world that's just pulled out of the ass. But what makes it even worse to me is the ending, where Thomas nearly put the actor in danger, and he gets praised for his impromptu rescue because we have to end the episode somehow. The actor could have gotten severely injured, possibly even killed due to Thomas's recklessness, and the tank engine gets no repercussions for it. This is that moment from Wonky Whistle, but far worse. I hated Thomas Goes to Bollywood when it first came out, and I still hate it now. If you like it, then good for you. Just don't give me any grief over not liking something you do. I've been through enough of that with Sodorama as it is. Well, that's going to do it for the international side of things. I don't think there's a lot more I could say that I haven't even in our episode reviews for the Emotions Corner or my solo reviews in Google Docs. So let's delve into the Sodor half of Series 22, shall we? The Steam team received a great shakeup with Edward's departure in Series 21, and in this series, we have Henry's departure. And there was no fanfare for the latter whatsoever, with Forever and Ever treating it like an afterthought. At least Edward had a full episode to excuse his departure. Henry got 2 lines, and that was it. That really says a lot as to how he'd been treated since 1945, doesn't it? So who takes over the berths at Tidmouth Sheds? Enter Nia the Kenyan Tank Engine and Rebecca the Yellow Engine. I'll start with Nia since she was introduced in the movie, and to anyone who hates her because she's from Kenya, just fuck off with that racist attitude. And if I had to read one more YouTube comment complaining that she replaced Edward, I swear I will disable comments altogether. Though no doubt people will do it anyway. Please, I really don't want to do so because of a few racist assholes, okay? If you ask me, Big World Big Adventures the movie was Nia's high point as a character. Sassy, feisty, quick-witted, and clever, it was a bit of a shame looking back that her personality had been reduced to just kind and helpful. Ironically, the same box that Edward was taken out of. That's not to say her roles in Series 22 were bad. She was empathetic to Gordon's plight in Forever and Ever, despite him being dismissive of her, more on that later. And she was shown to have struggles in reading numbers and counting on Nia, showing kids that there were different ways to learn rather than depending on a flawed, rigid syllabus. It's also very relatable to immigrants moving to another country. That being said, it's pretty funny that fans are accusing the episode for dumbing things down in a preschool show for little kids who are probably learning their numbers for the engines, most of whom have numbers painted on their sides. Of the pair, I like Rebecca better. Not to say that I don't like Nia, I still consider her in my top 10 favorites, mind you, but I just feel Rebecca is a tad stronger in terms of personality. She's a precious cinnamon roll that deserves protection at all costs. I thought both of her leading roles were really good, although what Rebecca does has lost a bit of its shine since we first reviewed it, but still a good episode nonetheless. And they showcase what Rebecca was like as a character really well. She has insecurities, yet she still loves to see the good in everyone, even someone as tricky as Diesel, which can sometimes lead to her coming off as gullible. But in the end, she's very honest and humble. It says a lot that Rebecca did more between 2018 and 2020 than Molly ever did since 2005. She even has a Scouse Liverpudlian accent provided by Rachel Miller, so it's nice that a bit of Liverpool is still part of the show. Of course, like Nia, Rebecca is an extremely divisive character because she replaced Henry on the Steam team, but from what I've seen, the division is probably not as strong as Nia's. According to Nia McHugh, Nia and Rebecca were brought into the Steam team to fix the gender imbalance at Tib of Sheds and diversify the show. Did it make a difference? Well, no, not really. If anything, it only served to shatter the already crumbling fanbase for good. Yes, it meant that Edward and Henry would no longer be poorly characterized, but at the same time, Thomas, Gordon, James, Percy, and Emily still maintained the archetypes established by Mattel since the takeover in 2013, though with Emily getting the bad end of the stick that would continue over the next 2 series. She didn't even get a lead role in Series 22, and most of her roles could have been taken over by anyone. Also, is Toby still part of the Steam team or not? He had a pair of starring roles in Series 23 and 24, and he's in the Engine Roll Call, yet he doesn't live at Tidmouth Sheds. It's a paradox for sure. And as for the gender imbalance, the problem wasn't really the lack of female characters in the show, especially given how many female characters had gotten great roles throughout the Brennan era. No, the problem was that there were far too many characters in the CGI series, and not enough time to give everyone room for development. They gave Rosie a revamp, and have done very little with her since. You know, in that promo of her with the Steam team, it made me wonder, was Rosie meant to live at Tidmouth Sheds? It seemed perfectly reasonable to me. She would have fit the main trio with Thomas and Percy far better than James for these reasons. She's a small engine, she's female, and she'd maintain the red-green-blue spectrum. It makes perfect sense for Rosie to live at Tidmouth in Edward's place. But of course, Series 21 lost 8 episodes, and with the introduction of Nia and Rebecca, Rosie was reassigned to Vicarstown with Henry, and that's also bursting with potential. Who knows what might have been done with Rosie, even in the revamp, and who else was birthed at Vicarstown Sheds in addition to Henry and Rosie?
The world may never know.
Speaking of which, let's talk about Forever and Ever, which is seen as one of Series 22's most controversial episodes, probably one of the most polarizing episodes of the entire era, which is saying something. Was it intended to be an Attack the Critics episode? No, I don't think so. It was written around 2016-17, and there was probably no way the writers would have known about the inevitable backlash it would have gotten from the fandom. However, I do see Forever and Ever as a satirical approach towards some of the more immature fans. Keywords. Some fans. It's a perfect metaphor for how they acted while Series 17 to 21 aired. They got very picky and entitled over the most minor problems in the same way Gordon constantly ridiculed Edward for his age. And then Mattel changed up the format of the show, and fans understandably got upset over it, much like Gordon getting upset over Henry and Edward leaving Tidmouth. And now that I'm thinking about it, many of us should have acknowledged what was being shown in Duncan the Grumpy Passenger and the way she does it. The writers were calling out to the fans to not act selfish and entitled, and then, when fans still didn't get the message, Mattel finally decided they would no longer listen to the fanbase, so here we are right now. That being said, despite Forever and Ever's intentions, all it did was further intensify the backlash towards the Big World Big Adventures era and Mattel in general, and it's not getting any smaller with All Engines Go. If anything, it's only gotten bigger.
Meanwhile...
Oh no.
What's wrong, Cam?
I'm not sure. I just got a chill running up my back and then I can sense that something is happening right now. And that's not a good thing.
You mean?
Oh yeah. I have a feeling that's not going to end well between Zach and you-know-who.
Another divisive episode among the fandom, though probably not as divisive as Forever and Ever, is Rosie is Red, a heartwarming story that's relatable to kids and adults. If fans are not too happy about the show introducing the concept of love to the target audience, then explain why you love a show that featured a woman kissing Percy. Again, why is it okay when one era does it, but not okay when another does it? Oh wait, I know why. It's because because there's an anti-Mattel pro-Allcroft bias going around in the fandom. I understand. But in all seriousness, Rosie is Red is an episode that shows why Thomas and Friends should be given the proper label of a kids show. Fans who try to insist otherwise are most likely insecure and have fragile egos. Yeah, that's probably the wrong thing for me to say, but it still had to be said in order to try and get it through their thick skulls. That's not to say every episode was bad. School of Duck was a real highlight that gave us a charming performance by Mark Morahan through Dexter the coach. Thomas's animal arc had a heartwarming message about helping those less fortunate than you, and Hunt the Truck was the best of Series 22, proving that Edward still had a place in the show despite being demoted. But then there was Apology Impossible. Between myself, Mike, Rachel, Cameron, and Matt, there are a lot of episodes that are pretty divisive between us. Apology Impossible is one of those exceptions. All 5 of us agree that it's awful, making James an outright bully to Philip for no reason, and a diesel box cab urging others to let James cross is not only wrong, but potentially dangerous, as if the episode was saying you should never stand up to your bullies. If you shouldn't do so when lives are at stake, when are you supposed to stand up to bullies? This is without question one of the worst episodes in the entire show's history, and considering that Apology Impossible is in the same series as An Engine of Many Colors, an episode where James actually felt remorse for his carelessness, just makes it even worse. Series 22 is very hard to find in the United States. It was going to be released on Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon Prime Video, but because of the Nickelodeon deal, plans were cancelled. It did eventually stream on Netflix in 2020, but only in the United Kingdom and Germany. Amazon Prime would eventually stream it in November that same year, along with the rest of Series 19 to 24. And strangely, on both Amazon and Spotify, many episodes were released in audio format with an unknown narrator explaining what's happening in some scenes. Basically, think of it as a descriptive video service drag that you find on several streaming services, like Netflix or Disney+. Overall, Series 22 was something alright. It wasn't as strong as 17 to 21, but it wasn't as painfully unwatchable like 13 to 16. It was very much middle of the road for me. It was an interesting experiment, but at the time, I think most of us could agree that everything was a lot better on Sodor, save for Apology Impossible. Hell, 9 episodes out of 10 on my personal favorites list came from Sodor alone. Most of the international episodes range from pretty decent to pretty terrible, and a lot of them felt like they could have taken place on Sodor and very little would change. Thomas constantly being shoved in your face didn't help either, getting all of the lead roles plus Thomas's animal arc, bringing his total to 14. Had it not been for Thomas Goes to Bollywood and Apology Impossible coming out the way they did, I think Series 22 may have fared a little better, perhaps on par with Series 19 at least. But as it stands, it's the weakest series that Brender & Co. have worked on since starting out in 2013. Meanwhile, I should probably bring this up, but I feel that a lot of fans have set expectations way too high since the airing of Series 20, and with both Series 21 and 22, as well as the free post-treasure specials, I couldn't help but feel that they may be acting as if the show should outright revert to how it was during the 80s and 90s, and if you think the show should outright go back as far as possible to the Stone Age, well, you're quite foolish in thinking so. Back in the late 2000s, early 2010s, model making was becoming expensive, and CGI was cheaper to utilize. In recent times, however, that trend appears to be reversing given how many YouTube channels are dedicated to model making themselves. I don't mean to sound condescending to anyone, but once you've had your childhood, that's it. You only get one childhood, so you better make the most of it while you still can. Thinking that Thomas and Friends should be like how it was during the 80s and 90s is almost like Star Wars fans who grew up with the original trilogy asking for the sequel trilogy to revisit that feeling of the originals. Long story short, guys, you must never set expectations too high for anything. The more you hype yourself up, the bigger the disappointment might be. If you got turned off from the newer content because of drastic changes, I get why, but it doesn't mean I agree with you. The reason I chose to continue is because there's only 2 series left to cover. Oh shit.
Uh-oh. Cam? Rach? Will help.
Oh, just a second, Brendan. Coming, Mike! I'm on it!
Yeah, sure. Guess I was right about before. I had a feeling this would happen sooner or later.
You don't judge a book by its cover. Don't make your mind up too soon. Things aren't necessarily